a pro. On top of that, you'll learn a secret trick that I promise you'll have never heard before. This video is jammed-packed full of useful tips from start to finish, so we highly recommend you watch the whole thing. We'll also be going over a challenger replay from the Korean pro player Rush. For those of you who don't already know, Rush has played in China, Korea and North American pro scenes and has made headlines recently when he was traded to Echo Fox from KT Rolster. Before we hop into the replay, let's briefly cover what route Rush will be using. To start, he gets wards in both pixel brushes. He does his red, raptors, wolves, and then blue. He'll hit level 3 off these 4 camps, and then move to secure the scuttle with the power spike. This path is used if your level 2 is much weaker than the enemy junglers, and if you're playing a champion that becomes a good deal stronger at level 3. One of the core strengths of this route is that when we do our red into raptors, we'll be able to scout if the enemy rushes an early scuttle. We can then pivot off raptors to the opposite scuttle. Essentially, by doing raptors, it's a stalling move that allows us to avoid committing to the other side of the map too early. At the same time, it allows us to hit level 3 relatively fast. Okay, so let's jump into a replay of Rush playing in Korean Challenger. He begins by running to the top side pixel brush. This is something that he does in every single game. The reason for this is that it's closer to his side of the map, so he can get there before anyone else can on the enemy team. At the same time, he moves through the banana brush before entering the pixel brush, which makes it super safe and hard for the enemy to spot him if they are invading. In comparison, the enemy would have to move through the open and would be easily spotted. One other benefit is that if you are spotted, it can sometimes fool the enemy into thinking that you're starting at your blue. If you find yourself not knowing what to do before minions spawn, then we'd recommend incorporating this into your gameplay. So Gragas gets a leash on his red and immediately notices that the enemy bot has shown in lane. This reveals that they're not leashing for the enemy Lee Sin, so we can deduce that he's starting at his red. Gragas then moves to his raptors. Let's pause briefly, as this is the first timing all junglers should be aware of. From 1 minute 50 to 1 minute 55 is when you should see the enemy jungler in your pixel brush if he was doing red into scuttle. However, as many of you have pointed out in previous videos, the enemy can also move through the top lane tri-brush, or if they have a dash, jump over the wall, allowing them to sneak the scuttle and avoid your ward. But there's actually a secret trick to spotting this that not even a lot of pro players know about. So when a scuttle spawns, it always moves toward the mid lane before walking back. This happens from 2 minutes to 2:05. If an enemy tries to sneakily avoid your wards and kills the scuttle in the fog of war, then you can actually know this since the scuttle won't appear in your ward at this time. Additionally, the scuttle will then reappear at the 2:18 to 2:28 mark. Once again, if we don't see the scuttle in our ward at this time, then we know it's being killed. This is how you can spot an enemy trying to sneak a rift scuttle. Okay, great. Now let's go back to the replay. Rush has finished his raptors and is moving towards his blue side. A lot of people wonder what goes through a pro player's mind. I want to take a moment to show you exactly what Rush would be thinking about. He knows that Lee Sin started red buff, and from this he knows there's 4 possible routes that Lee Sin could be doing. The first one is red into scuttle. However, Rush knows that Lee Sin isn't doing this path since he never showed in the pixel brush ward and by using the scuttle trick mentioned earlier. At the same time, Jax has been overextended and would have likely been ganked by now, so we can cross that one off the list. The second one is red into raptors into scuttle. We know that Lee Sin isn't doing this route either, as he would have shown in the pixel brush ward by the 2:15 timing, so we can cross that one off as well. The third one is red into Krugs. After Krugs, Lee Sin would go for the Scuttle or his Raptors. But this is still a possibility. The fourth one is red into the blue side of the map, which is also still possible. Now, some of you may think that there is a fifth route where Lee Sin does red and then steals Gragas's blue by moving through the top lane tri-brush or ward hopping over the Baron Pit. This is a possibility, but it isn't as strong of an option for Lee Sin as you might think. Lee Sin will be spending a lot of time walking from red to Gragas's blue buff. In the meantime, Gragas will be farming his camps one by one very efficiently. After Lee Sin steals the blue, he'll want to secure the Scuttle to deny it from Gragas. However, Gragas will be in a position to contest, and it's unlikely that Lee Sin will have priority in his top lane, since his top had to give him a leash. And even if Lee Sin does secure his Scuttle, he then has all of his camps up. If he were to move to his blue side, then he leaves his Raptors and Krugs open to being stolen by Gragas. If he spends time clearing his Raptors before he goes to his blue, then that can give Gragas enough time to clear his Wolves, Gromp and hit level 3. Then, recall, purchase Predator Boots, and look to contest the bot side Scuttle or even invade Lee Sin's blue. At that point, Lee Sin would need priority in his bot lane and mid lane to defend. As you can see, if Lee Sin does do red into blue, it creates a really volatile scenario where Gragas has too many opportunities for counterplay. At the same time, it forces Lee Sin into farming instead of ganking to avoid being counter-jungled. For this reason, it's a very uncommon route for people to take. Alright, so Rush then moves to his wolf camp. Remember when I said that Lee Sin doing red into Krugs into Scuttle was still a possibility? That was just ruled out. Can you tell me why that is? It's for two reasons. Firstly, Lee Sin would have been spotted starting Scuttle at the 225 mark. Secondly, Jax is really overextended and would have almost certainly been ganked. This leaves only one path left, Lee Sin doing his red into the bot side of the map. Rush then continues to his blue buff, where he then spots Lee Sin in the bot side ward. The first time you spot the enemy jungler is such an important timing. You should be doing three things the first time you see them. To begin with, you need to move your camera and check to see what buffs he has. In this case, we see that Lee Sin has both red and blue buff. This helps indicate what camps he's taken. Next, we need to left click on Lee Sin. This will show his buff timers. By doing this, we can see that Lee Sin's red buff is going to expire first. This confirms that he started at his red. This is also a nice trick to use if you don't know where the enemy jungler started. At the same time, we can check to see how recently Lee Sin killed his blue buff. Since his blue buff won't expire for a long time, we can conclude that he killed blue right before moving to the Scuttle. The last thing you do is hit tab and check the scoreboard for the enemy's CS. As we can see, Lee Sin has 16 CS. As I'm sure many of you know, each camp is worth 4. We know that Lee Sin has killed both his red and his blue. This equals 8 CS. We also know that he just killed Scuttle. That's 12. This means he killed one other camp. It's either his Raptors, Wolves, or Gromp. However, based on how recently he acquired his blue buff, it's unlikely that he killed Gromp, since people usually do that after doing blue. So, we now know that Lee Sin has either killed Raptors or Wolves. If we jump back to Rush's perspective, we can see he's in position to steal Lee Sin's Raptors and Krugs after his blue. Rush is keeping this in the back of his mind. If Lee Sin heads towards bot, he will know to go for the enemy's Raptors and Krugs. Instead, Lee Sin moves through mid lane and goes to his Raptors. This confirms that Lee Sin did red into Wolves into blue into Scuttle. This leaves his Krug and Gromp camps left up. After Lee Sin does his Raptors, it's likely that he'll clear his Krugs. This is because they are worth the most experience, and you often want to kill them in order to get them to respawn. The second Krug respawn is worth a ton of experience, and is often what lets you keep up with laners and not hit level 6 too late. After Rush secures Scuttle, he begins moving to his Gromp. Notice how he pings the enemy Krugs to inform his teammates where the Lee Sin is. This is something he's consistently been doing throughout the game, and something that you should try to mimic. After clearing Gromp, he begins to recall. As some of you might be wondering why he doesn't move to counter-gank top, as Jax is overextended and he knows that Lee Sin just finished his Crux. Well, Jax has a lot of mobility with his Q and CC with his E. On top of that, he still has Flash. Rush is aware that Jax should be able to escape a gank if necessary. At the same time, he knows that his Raptors will be respawning soon. If he spends time trying to counter-gank top and it doesn't work out, then he risks Lee Sin getting tempo advantage on the bot side and possibly stealing his Raptors. After recalling, Gragas begins moving towards his Krugs. He knows two things from earlier. Firstly, that Lee Sin's Gromp is still up, and secondly, that his Wolves will be respawning soon. For those of you who don't know, the first camp you kill after your blue buff will respawn at around 4 minutes and 40 seconds. So Lee Sin's Wolves and Gragas' Raptors will be respawning around that time. It's for this reason, and the fact that Lee Sin never ganked top, that we can be certain Lee Sin recalled after doing Krugs and will be moving to his Gromp and pressuring around the bot side of the map. However, surprisingly, Lee Sin decides to lane gank mid, which ends up working out and secures him a kill. Now, this may seem terrible for Gragas, but by Lee Sin ganking mid, he's now behind on farming his camps. If we look at the state of the minimap, we can pretty much guarantee what Lee Sin will be doing for the next minute or two. He'll clear his Wolves, then Gromp, and then look to take the scuttle that's respawning. After Rush clears his Raptors and picks up the farm at mid, he begins moving towards the top side of the map. He invades the enemy jungle and gets a nice ward in the Raptor brush. He's safe to invade at this time because he knows from earlier that Lee Sin has to be clearing his bot side camps. This sets up an amazing tactic that every jungler should be aware of. From 5 minutes 30 to 6 minutes is when solo laners will hit level 6. Often, the laner that's behind will have to concede control of the wave, since they know that the enemy will spike level 6 before them. This will typically cause a big wave to build up. This is especially prominent top, where the lane is longer and people don't have access to as much ranged wave clear. Rush, knowing about this timing, moves to dive top. And notice how Jax is level 6 while Vi is still level 5. Even though Jax dies from this gank, it's still highly beneficial for him since Vi is missing out on all of the experience and gold from the wave. He then does something that's extremely high level. Almost every other person would have cleared the remainder of these minions. However, if he does that, it will clean reset the next wave to be in the center of the lane. If he leaves the wave as it is, it will begin slow pushing back towards Jax. Since Vi doesn't have teleport available and is already behind, this will result in denying further gold and experience, possibly letting Jax set up a freeze and putting Vi in an exposed and disadvantaged position. He then moves towards mid in an attempt to help Irelia. At the same time, since he's tracked Lee Sin's route, he knows that his Raptors will be spawning soon. He steals them and leaves one up so they don't respawn. This is typically what you do if you're not planning on stealing them again in the future. If Gragas was further ahead and Lee Sin was further behind, then he could full clear the camp to get a timer on it and reinvade on the respawn. After stealing the Raptors, he moves to clear his Gromp. If we take a look at top, we can see how overextended Vi is. This was all set up earlier when he chose not to clear the wave. So he then ganks top and secures the free kill. Afterwards, he escapes with Jax from the incoming Lissandra and Lee Sin. We covered a lot in this video, so let's recap. Rush begins by placing wards in both pixel brushes and then gets a leash. He knows that Lee Sin started at red since bot lane showed so early in lane. Additionally, he knows that Lee Sin isn't sneaking a scuttle since he can see them moving in the pixel brush wards. By using our early vision, and knowledge of the key timings, we were able to deduce that Lee Sin did red into his blue side. The first time Lee Sin was spotted, we checked what buffs he had, what time they were going to expire, and his CS. Through this, we figured out what camps he had cleared. Next, Lee Sin moved to his Raptors, which told us he would be moving to his Krugs next. After Krugs, since he didn't gank top, he knew that Lee Sin would be recalling and heading toward the bot side of the map, where he'd be stuck farming for a good period of time. Rush took advantage of this and safely invaded his top side, where he executed a well-timed tactic of ganking top lane when one person is spiked level 6 over the other. He then purposely didn't clear minions, so it would push back to Jax and leave Vi overextended. Afterwards, he re-ganked top, securing Jax a massive lead. Alright, that is going to be it for this one. Thank you for watching.